Catering staff are around back, dear. The words dripped like poison. Heat crawled up my neck, a slow burn. Fine. She wanted a show. What she didn't know, couldn't possibly fathom as she surveyed my discount rack sandals, was the quiet man near the champagne fountain. Daniel, my husband, a billionaire. She thought she was humiliating some nobody. Fool. She has no idea he's watching, how rage darkens his eyes. She thinks she's teaching me a lesson, a very public one. But kindness simmers beneath my humiliation. It always does. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden identities and instant karma, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Now, let me tell you exactly what happened that day. My name is Marion, and if someone had told me 3 years ago that I'd be married to one of the world's most successful tech billionaires, I would have laughed in their face. But life has a funny way of surprising you. I met Daniel Harrison at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn where I was working on a design project for a local bakery. He was just another customer in line, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, nothing that screamed wealth or power. We struck up a conversation about the art on the walls and something just clicked. We dated for 8 months before he told me who he really was. By then, I was already completely in love with the man, not his bank account. When he finally revealed that he was the Daniel Harrison, the guy who'd built Harrison Industries from nothing and was now worth billions, I nearly choked on my coffee. But what shocked me even more was his request. He wanted to keep our relationship and eventually our marriage completely private. You see, Daniel's world is complicated. Every move he makes gets analyzed by investors, competitors, and the media. Having a public relationship would mean constant scrutiny, paparazzi following us everywhere, and people questioning whether I was with him for love or money. Neither of us wanted that. So we got married in a small ceremony with just our immediate families. And for 3 years, we've lived this beautiful double life where I get to be just marrying to the outside world, while privately being the wife of one of the most powerful men in America. It worked perfectly until last Tuesday when everything changed because of a single cream-colored invitation that showed up in my mailbox. The envelope was thick and expensive, with gold lettering that read, "An evening of luxury fashion hosted by someone named Vivian Cross from a brand called Crimson Luxury." I had absolutely no idea how I'd gotten on the guest list for what was clearly an exclusive Manhattan fashion event. I stared at that invitation for hours, debating whether to go. Part of me was curious about this world of high fashion and elite society that I'd been avoiding for 3 years. Daniel had never pressured me to attend industry events or mingle with wealthy socialites, but maybe it was time to step out of my comfort zone. Maybe it was time to see what I'd been missing. The morning of the event, I stood in my closet feeling completely lost. Everything I owned suddenly seemed wrong for a luxury fashion showcase. I didn't have designer gowns or expensive jewelry. I was just a regular woman who happened to be married to an extraordinary man. But nobody at this event would know that. Finally, I chose a simple white dress that I'd bought from a boutique in my neighborhood. It was pretty and made me feel confident, which I figured was more important than a designer label. I couldn't have been more wrong about that. The venue was a stunning penthouse overlooking Central Park with floor-to-the-ceiling windows that showcased the Manhattan skyline. As soon as I walked through the door, I knew I was in over my head. The other guests looked like they'd stepped out of fashion magazines, women in flowing silk gowns, men in perfectly tailored suits, everyone dripping in jewelry that probably cost more than most people's cars. The air was filled with the sound of champagne glasses clinking and conversations about art auctions, European vacations, and business deals worth millions. I accepted a glass of champagne from a server and tried to blend in, focusing on the beautiful displays of clothing and accessories scattered throughout the space. The pieces were absolutely gorgeous. Hand-beaded evening gowns in deep purple and gold, structured blazers that looked like works of art, and jewelry that caught the light like captured fire. But when I accidentally glanced at a price tag, my eyes nearly popped out of my head. A simple silk scarf was priced at $800. That's when I first noticed her watching me. Vivian Cross was exactly what you'd expect from a luxury brand owner. Tall, elegant, with perfectly styled silver hair and sharp cheekbones that could cut glass. She was wearing a stunning burgundy gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and she was surrounded by a small group of admirers who hung on her every word, but her cold gray eyes kept drifting to me with unmistakable disapproval. I tried to ignore the stares and focus on appreciating the craftsmanship of the pieces on display. I genuinely loved beautiful things, even if I couldn't afford them. But my peaceful browsing was interrupted when a woman in an elegant cream blazer approached me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Are you here with the catering staff?" "Because the service entrance is around back, dear." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, but I kept my voice steady. "Actually, I'm a guest. I have an invitation." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up in surprise. She looked me up and down again, taking in my simple white dress and basic sandals with obvious disdain. "Oh," she said, drawing out the word like it tasted bad. "Well, I suppose the guest list has become quite inclusive these days." Before I could respond, she'd already turned away, but I could hear her whispering to her companion about declining standards and letting just anyone in nowadays. I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach, the same feeling I'd had in middle school when the popular kids made it clear I didn't belong at their lunch table. But I wasn't 13 anymore, and I wasn't going to let them chase me away. I had every right to be here, and I was going to enjoy this beautiful showcase regardless of what anyone thought about my outfit or my background. So I lifted my chin and continued exploring, determined to make the best of the evening. That's when Vivian Cross herself decided to grace me with her attention. She glided over with the confidence of someone who owned not just the room, but probably the entire building. Her burgundy dress moved like liquid silk, and her diamond jewelry caught the light with every step. She was undeniably stunning, but there was something cold and calculating in her eyes that made my skin crawl. "I don't believe we've been introduced," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand adorned with rings that probably cost more than my car. "I'm Vivian Cross, owner and creative director of Crimson Luxury." "And you are Marion," I replied, shaking her hand briefly. Her grip was firm and cold. "Thank you for hosting such a beautiful showcase. The craftsmanship is absolutely incredible." She smiled, but it was the kind of smile a shark might give before attacking. "How wonderful that you appreciate fine craftsmanship. Tell me, Marion, what brings you to an event like this? Are you perhaps a fashion journalist, a lifestyle blogger?" I could hear the condescension dripping from every word. She was fishing, trying to figure out why someone dressed like me was at her exclusive event. "I received an invitation," I said simply. "I'm interested in fashion and wanted to see your collection." "How interesting," Vivian mused, her eyes scanning my outfit once more, with barely concealed disgust. "And what do you do for work, if you don't mind me asking?" I hadn't volunteered the information, but I answered anyway. "I'm a freelance graphic designer." It was true, I'd maintained my small design business even after marrying Daniel. I loved the creative work, and it helped me feel like I had my own identity separate from being a billionaire's secret wife. Vivian's smile became even more patronizing. "How quaint. Well, I do hope you're finding everything educational, though. I should mention most of our pieces started around $5,000, just so you know what you're looking at." The implication was crystal clear. These things aren't for people like you. I felt anger bubbling up in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "They're beautiful pieces. Someone with incredible talent created them." "Yes, well, talent and exclusivity go hand in hand," she said, her voice getting louder. Other guests were starting to notice our conversation, phones appearing as people sensed drama brewing. We cater to a very specific clientele, people who understand and can truly appreciate luxury, not just admire it from afar. I was about to respond when I caught sight of a familiar figure near the back of the room. Daniel was there, partially hidden behind a group of people admiring a jewelry display. He was wearing a simple charcoal suit that looked expensive but understated, and he'd been so quiet that most people probably hadn't even noticed him arrive. Our eyes met briefly across the room, and I saw him register what was happening. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he stayed where he was. We'd agreed long ago that he wouldn't interfere in my life unless I specifically asked him to. But Vivian wasn't finished with me yet. She gathered quite an audience now, and I could see she was enjoying being the center of attention. "You know, Marion, she continued, her voice carrying across the nearby conversations. I'm curious about something. This is a very exclusive event. Our guest list is carefully curated. I personally approve every single invitation that goes out. My stomach dropped as I realized what was happening. She was challenging my right to be there in front of everyone, turning my presence into a public spectacle. I definitely received an invitation, I said, reaching into my small purse to pull out the cream-colored card. My hands were trembling slightly, but I managed to keep my voice steady. Vivian took the invitation from me and examined it with exaggerated care, holding it up to the light as if checking for forgeries. The small crowd around us had grown significantly, and I could hear whispered conversations and see more phones being pulled out. This was turning into entertainment for them, the evening's main event. Well, she finally said, handing the invitation back to me with a theatrical flourish. This does appear to be genuine. How very mysterious. I wonder how such an obvious mistake could have happened. She turned to address the crowd that had gathered around us. Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to have a little puzzle on our hands. I wanted to disappear into the marble floor. Every eye in that penthouse was now on me, and I could see the judgment written clearly on their faces. My simple white dress suddenly felt like a neon sign advertising that I didn't belong in their world. Perhaps, Vivian continued, her voice dripping with fake concern, there was some kind of administrative error. Sometimes invitations are sent to the wrong addresses. It happens with mass mailings, especially when you're dealing with, shall we say, less sophisticated mailing lists. The humiliation was overwhelming, but something deep inside me refused to back down. Maybe it was 3 years of being married to one of the most powerful men in the world, or maybe it was just stubborn pride, but I wasn't going to let her chase me away. There was no error, I said quietly but firmly. I belong here as much as anyone else. Vivian's mask of politeness finally slipped completely. Do you? She asked, her voice sharp and cruel now. Because I'm looking at you, dear, and I'm seeing someone who clearly doesn't understand what this event is actually about. This isn't some community center fashion show. This is about luxury, about exclusivity, about maintaining certain standards in our industry. She gestured dismissively at my outfit like I was wearing rags. You're wearing what? A $30 dress from some chain store. Those sandals probably came from a discount rack. And that jewelry, she actually laughed. A cold sound that made several people in the crowd was, I've seen better pieces in airport gift shops. The crowd was eating it up. I could see people recording with their phones, whispering behind their hands, some looking genuinely shocked by Vivian's cruelty, while others seemed to be enjoying the show. With each word she spoke, I felt smaller and more exposed. The problem with events like this, Vivian announced to her captive audience, is that sometimes the wrong sort of people manage to slip through the cracks. People who don't understand that luxury isn't just about buying something expensive. It's about belonging to a world that values quality, refinement, and proper breeding. I glanced toward Daniel again. He'd moved significantly closer, weaving through the crowd with a kind of purposeful movement that meant he was barely keeping his temper in check. I could see the storm building in his dark eyes, the way his hands were clenched at his sides, every muscle in his body coiled with tension. But he was still holding back, waiting for me to give him some signal that I needed his help. I think there's been enough of a scene, I said, trying to extract myself from the situation with whatever dignity I had left. Maybe I should just go. But Vivian wasn't finished humiliating me yet. Oh, you absolutely should go, she agreed with vicious satisfaction. But first, I think we need to address something important here. This is a teachable moment about maintaining standards. She walked over to a nearby table where servers had arranged glasses of sparkling water, garnished with cucumber slices and fresh mint. The crowd followed her movement like she was performing on stage, which in a way she was. Without any warning, she picked up one of the glasses and held it high above her head. This, she declared to the entire room, her voice carrying over every conversation, is what happens when we don't maintain proper standards. When we let just anyone into exclusive spaces, and before I could react, before I could even process what was happening, she threw the entire contents of the glass directly at my face. The shock of the ice-cold water hit me first, followed immediately by gasps and exclamations from the crowd. Sparkling water dripped from my hair down onto my white dress, and pieces of cucumber slid down my cheek onto the marble floor. I stood there stunned and dripping, while Vivian smiled with pure vindictive triumph. "Now," she said, her voice filled with satisfaction, "I think you understand exactly where you truly belong." The entire penthouse had gone completely silent, except for the sound of water dripping onto the floor and the quiet clicking of camera phones. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, some shocked, some horrified, and others clearly entertained by the spectacle. My white dress was now transparent in several places, clinging uncomfortably to my skin, and my hair hung in wet strands around my face. But instead of running away crying, which is probably what Vivian expected, I stood perfectly still. I wiped the water from my eyes with as much dignity as I could muster and looked directly at her. "Is that supposed to make you feel better about yourself?" I asked quietly. For just a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across Vivian's face. She clearly hadn't expected me to respond with anything other than tears or anger or a humiliated retreat. "I think," she said, recovering her composure quickly, "that you've gotten the message loud and clear. Security can escort you out now." That's when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, measured, and somehow conveying more authority than all of Vivian's shouting and grandstanding had managed. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Daniel. I recognized his walk, the particular way he moved when he was absolutely furious, but trying to stay in control. The crowd seemed to sense the shift in the room's energy before they even saw him. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People began turning to see who was approaching, and there was a palpable tension that hadn't been there moments before. Daniel walked through the crowd like he owned the place, which I suddenly realized with a start he very well might. He stopped directly beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body and smell his familiar cologne. Without saying a single word, he pulled a crisp white handkerchief from his jacket pocket and gently began dabbing the water from my face and hair. His touch was tender and protective, and somehow managed to make me feel less exposed despite my soaked dress in the staring crowd. "Excuse me," Vivian said, clearly annoyed by this interruption to her moment of triumph. "This is a private event. If you're not on the guest list, I am," Daniel said quietly, not even looking at her. He was still focused on helping me dry off, his movements careful and gentle, like I was made of something precious. Vivian looked him up and down dismissively. His charcoal suit was clearly expensive, but it wasn't flashy, and he didn't wear the kind of obvious luxury accessories that marked someone as important in her world of status symbols. "I don't recall approving your invitation either," she said with renewed confidence, emboldened by what she perceived as support from her audience. Daniel finally looked up at her, and something in his expression made several people in the crowd instinctively take a step backward. When he was truly angry, Daniel had a way of looking at people that could freeze blood in veins. "I don't need your approval for anything," he said, his voice still quiet, but carrying an edge that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Oh, really?" Vivian laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "And who exactly are you supposed to be? Her boyfriend? Her husband?" She turned to address the crowd again, playing to her audience. "Let me guess. You're a car salesman, a middle manager somewhere." Daniel straightened to his full height, and I felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. He looked directly into Vivian's eyes with the kind of steady gaze that had intimidated CEOs and world leaders. "I'm her husband," he said simply. The effect was immediate and electric. Vivian's confident smile faltered for just a moment, and confused murmurs rippled through the crowd like a wave. Someone behind me whispered, "Wait, what?" But Vivian recovered quickly, her laugh becoming even more cruel and mocking. "Her husband. Oh, that's absolutely precious. What are you, a grocery store manager? A substitute teacher?" She gestured dramatically at both of us. "Did you hear that, everyone? The discount dress girl actually found someone to marry her." Several people in the crowd looked uncomfortable now, sensing that something was shifting, but not sure what. A few were still recording, but others had quietly put their phones away. That's when someone in the crowd gasped audibly. A woman in an elegant silver gown had pulled out her phone and was staring at the screen with wide, shocked eyes. "Oh my God," she whispered. But in the silence of the room, everyone heard her clearly. "What?" someone else asked. "That's Daniel Harrison," she said, her voice getting stronger as the realization hit her fully. "That's Daniel Harrison." The name rippled through the crowd like electricity. Phones came out immediately as people began frantically Googling, and I watched face after face change from confusion to shock to something approaching panic. "Daniel Harrison," another voice said, high and tight with sudden anxiety. "The tech billionaire. The guy who owns Harrison Industries." "Wait," someone else said, their voice barely above a whisper. "Harrison Industries. Don't they own like half the major companies in the city, including several fashion brands?" Another person added, and I could hear the dawning horror in their voice as they realized what they'd just witnessed. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Vivian looked like she'd been struck by lightning, her face going completely white as the implications of what she'd done began to sink in. Several people in the crowd were frantically deleting the videos they'd just recorded, while others stood frozen in place like deer caught in headlights. Daniel didn't say anything else. He didn't need to threaten anyone or make dramatic declarations. His mere presence, his identity, was enough to completely transform the situation. He simply put his arm around my shoulders with infinite gentleness and began guiding me toward the exit. As we walked away, I could hear Vivian's voice behind us, high and desperate, and completely stripped of its earlier arrogance. "Wait, Mr. Harrison, please wait. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I had no idea who she was. I never would have. But we didn't stop." Daniel led me through the crowd of stunned faces and into the elevator, where the doors closed on the chaos we were leaving behind. Only then did I finally allow myself to breathe again. "I'm sorry," I said as we descended toward the lobby. "I should have asked for your help sooner. I shouldn't have let it go that far." He turned to face me, his eyes still dark with anger, but his voice incredibly gentle. "You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. You handled that situation with more grace and dignity than she deserved." "Did you see the look on her face when she realized who you were?" I asked, and despite everything that had happened, I found myself starting to smile. "I saw it," he said, pulling me closer and pressing a soft kiss to my forehead. "But more importantly, I saw how you stood up for yourself. I saw you refuse to be intimidated or broken down. I'm so incredibly proud of you." The next morning, I woke up to discover that the story was everywhere. Someone had managed to get partial video before Daniel's identity was revealed, and the internet had done what the internet does best. It had identified everyone involved and dug up every relevant detail. Vivian Cross was trending on social media for all the wrong reasons, with hashtags like Watergate and fashion fail attached to her name. Crimson Luxury's stock price was in complete free fall. By the end of the week, Vivian had issued 3 separate public apologies, each more desperate than the last. But the damage was irreversible. Several major retailers had dropped her brand entirely, and I'd heard through Daniel's business connections that she was facing serious financial difficulties. There was even talk of her having to sell the company. I didn't take any pleasure in her downfall. Honestly, what happened that night was punishment enough. Public humiliation is a terrible thing, even when someone brings it on themselves. But I did learn something incredibly important about myself through the whole experience. I learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. I learned that I didn't need to hide from Daniel's world anymore, that I could hold my own in any situation if I just trusted myself. I learned that respect isn't about designer clothes or expensive jewelry. It's about how you treat other people and how you carry yourself through difficult moments. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the quiet person standing in the corner, the one everyone overlooks and underestimates, might just be the most powerful person in the room. And sometimes, just sometimes, karma arrives faster than anyone expects. And that's how one moment of cruelty completely changed everything. Vivian learned that you never know who you're dealing with, and sometimes karma comes faster than you expect. What would you have done in Marion's situation? Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this story of instant justice. Smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Hit the bell icon so you never miss when I upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next.